Hello, hello.
Mm.
Welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Souter, and with me today is Nate the lawyer. Nate, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Today I have officially have my baby spoon with me again because all my fans keep
Oh,
telling me, Nate, where's the baby spoon? Where's the baby spoon? So the baby spoon is back, right? Because we've done dishes. So I'm back with the baby spoon again.
and you have Baby Yoda now. You have Baby Yoda. You got the lamp. You
Yes,
got the. Pretty soon, your set
season
is going to
two.
be almost as good as mine. I mean, you still need to. I understand. You got some work to do, but you'll get there. You'll get there.
It's funny because like everything is getting like their own YouTube channels and Twitter accounts, like the lamp. Oh, the lamp. The lamp is too far over. I forgot I got always have the lamp on because the lamp has not been getting any love.
Oh,
Ah,
well,
I'm sitting here wrestling with the lamp. Say it again.
I don't know why the lamp treats me with more respect than you. Do you realize that the lamp subbed to me before you did? I got the lamp
Mm.
followed me on Twitter before you did. Um,
Me and the lamp were having problems earlier, so it's
oh,
a
okay, I
bad breakup.
understand
But now we're back. Now we're
that.
back.
Well, with that Jason mask, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Secret Squirrel, 5 pound super chat. Great to see the toothbrush. Um,
Mm. It's a spoon, squirrel.
yeah,
It's
wait,
a
wait, wait. I
spoon.
don't,
Secret
I
squirrel
don't.
knows.
Um,
Secret squirrel knows. He's just joking with me.
okay, I was going to ask. I was like, I think I'm missing something. All right, well, so let's
Uh,
not bury the lead. I think there's at roughly 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Trump released really some of the biggest news in the Western Hemisphere. He naturally released it on Twitter, saying that he and his wife both tested positive for COVID-19. It looks like he probably got this from Hope Hicks, who also tested positive. It was, in fact, because she tested positive that they ran an extra test on the president, who's routinely tested anyway. He has tested positive. His wife has tested positive. Even after Hope Hicks had tested positive, he continued to go to, I think it was a rally in New Jersey, continued to
yeah.
actually, yeah. So he did so without a mask, which we'll get to because that doesn't mean what people think it does, but we'll get into that. He hasn't been wearing a mask, and that translates now to a dramatically increased chance that his entire senior staff has been exposed. Who has it? Nobody knows yet. But it looks like, I mean, this has the potential to really sort of go ravage through the upper echelons of the White House. Anyways, I don't know. That's about it. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, there are two issues that I think you have to be talked about when you talk about this. The first is the the political implications, right?
Hmm.
Because no matter what anybody says, Trump has been downplaying the virus for a while, and that downplaying this also kind of puts it into now this sphere of, oh my god, now he's gotten it. And then I think this the second piece of it is it's just his own health. Let's just not be coy here. He's a 74-year-old man with coronavirus. Those are usually not things that you want to hear if you're in that age group, because we know that age group is more susceptible to the virus. And then I think the third thing that we definitely have to recognize too is that how's this going to happen with the debates, right? Because now we have debates that have to happen, and the next debate's in 2 weeks. But how are you going to have that debate if he's in the quarantine for 14 days? And 2 weeks is the minimum. Let's say if he gets sick, that turns into a month, you know? So the election day is 34 days away, right? So, I mean, sorry, 32 days away. So if he can't debate, if he can't campaign for the last month, I think, Trump, this is the worst possible news for the Trump campaign that could have happened. And this is what they call, is this the October surprise everybody keeps talking about? The October surprise. The October
Yeah,
surprise.
that's yeah. Well, so just earlier this week, in fact, he said that the virus or that the pandemic was ending. It was coming to an end. He said that earlier this week. The numbers are all starting to head back up again. It looks like a number of states, and what was a state. I'm still waking up, so my brain's it's in neutral. But there was a state that the numbers are going up, and they just went to a new phase of opening, despite the fact the numbers are currently going up. But yeah, so according to the CDC, people aged 65 to 75 face a 5 times greater risk of hospitalization and 90 times greater risk of death from COVID-19 as compared to adults 18 to 29. So Trump is at the far end of that. He's 74. So he's at the high end of basically the second largest risk group. This is not including the fact that he also has a moderate heart disease. His last calcium score was
Oof.
133. Yeah, and he's been on statins. He's been on Cipro, or sorry, not Cipro. Cipro's for.
Hydroxychloroquine, right? He said he
Yeah.
was taking
Well, he did
hydroxychloroquine.
say he was taking hydro. He lied about. I have zero doubt in my mind he lied about that. But he was on. It was on. Oh, the one of the biggest named statins. I think it begins with a C. I forget what it was. But he's on statins and still has high of the especially of the bad cholesterol. I think it's what HDL, and despite being
Mhm.
on that, and he also made an emergency trip to Walter Reed National Medical Center, which nobody understands or knows how or why, but it appears he had.
All right,
There were speculations he had a stroke, but if he did, he recovered awfully quickly. So I don't. But
but
he's clearly not in great medical shape.
yeah, well, I don't know. I, you know, unless I hear kind of some evidence about why he went, he could have had heart, chest flutters. Went there and they said,
That's
"Oh,
true.
there's nothing wrong with you," or something like that. So rushing to the hospital as a 74-year-old man, any type of chest ailment or something, you want to take that person to the hospital, right? Why we take a chance? He's
Good
obese.
point.
He has some other issues, but I would say this. I think when you look at the whole thing as a whole, eventually it's just like the cold, right? That's what the CDC and everybody's been saying. This is going to be like the common cold. People are just, we're just going to get it and like, oh, you got coronavirus, and that's it. But I think the actual political implications of this is the problem. I don't think Trump being positive with the virus is as shocking as the political implications of this. Because don't forget, we are only 30 days away from election day. And right now, Trump is sidelined for 15, half of that time. He can't rally. He can't do that. How serious is this for his campaign? Because don't forget, he had campaign stops coming up. He had like 4 coming
Yep.
up.
Yep.
He's doing his interviews. This really kills his campaign. And now the second part is the debates. Joe Biden now
Yeah.
gets off free with the debates because everyone thought that Trump's big advantage was the debates.
Yeah.
He had that horrible debate last time, and now the next 2 debates, he gives Joe Biden his card to get out of the debate. So I think, again, I hate saying this, but this was a disaster at the worst possible time the disaster could come through. What do you think, Nick?
No, I completely agree. I think it dovetails into. I mean, so first of all, the Baltimore Health Commissioner has said that she believes it's going to be at least a week or so before he starts to develop symptoms. It's going to be another week or 2 after that before he gets very, very ill, if that's going to happen. Now, he is clinically obese, so my suspicion is he's going to get very, very sick. So I think you're right. I think so. At a minimum, it would be a 2-week quarantine, but the reality is, usually they say, I forget, I forget what the guidelines is. I think it's 2 weeks after your last positive test, or sorry, your last negative test. So he's still, he has to test negative and then still quarantine for a period of time after that. And he's literally just at the front end of this. So he's looking at a minimum of 1 week before symptoms, probably another 2 weeks of being really noticeably sick and then starting to recover. And that's assuming he doesn't get it very, very really sick. Now, it's not only, right now, he could still do television. He can still do
Mm-hmm.
some kind of remote going into, and in fact, I kind of think that they're going to try to find a way to play that up. You know what I mean? Where there's going to be a rally of some kind. There's going to be a big screen, and he's going to be sort of this macho, like I'm being a leader, and I'm remoting in because no sickness is going to keep me from talking to
Yeah,
you guys and telling.
but but Nick, but then you have all of the media coverage, all of that time. He was saying this
Oh
is
yeah,
BS. He wants to be with the people. It's like that's the reason why. Because he said, he was making fun of Joe Biden for doing that, right? Why are you holding these
that's
rallies? This, and I think the problem is he put himself into a box
hmm
and he made a heavy bet, right, that I can turn the corner on COVID, right before the election. And those talking points were, we got a vaccine coming out like tomorrow, right? The vaccine is on the way. We have, we've turned the corner. And that puts all of that into jeopardy, and now puts the coronavirus back on the forefront. Now we're not talking about Hunter Biden. Now we're not talking about Joe Biden being, loopy. We're talking about the coronavirus again, and the president and his
That's true.
staff having the coronavirus. That is not a good talking point for this president. It just no matter who you support, if people think coronavirus is a good talking point for Trump, they are helping him lose the election. How do you turn the corner from this, right? He's positive. He's positive.
Yeah, no, that's true.
He's been
That's
telling
true.
people, don't wear masks. Don't. He has so many of these negatives about, the CDC director's wrong, this person's wrong, and now he has it. And just to be clear, just because you don't wear masks doesn't mean you're automatically going to get it. We're talking about risk assessment, right? You wear a
Yep.
mask and it lowers your risk for getting a virus. You're 6 feet, the 6 feet distance lowers your risk of being exposed. So if you violate all those, then you can say, well, there's a high probability that his exposure risk was a lot higher than someone who was following these ordinances. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, keep in mind too. So the mask lowers your risk, but by a almost infinitesimal amount. The only reason is because it keeps you from touching your mouth, and if you have it on your hand, but it doesn't really. It doesn't help much other than that. What it helps most with is it helps keep you from spreading it to others as much. It reduces the risk for others near you. So it's one of those things. When I see people not wearing a mask, I'm sitting there going, it's not that they're endangering themselves, they're endangering others more than anything else. And he wasn't wearing a mask, so it's sort of like, what's going to happen to his senior staff now, because most of them were wearing masks. He still got it, ostensibly from Hope Hicks, is what it looks like. And so
Well,
the
can I just,
yeah,
just to
please,
correct
please.
just to correct one thing about the mask is that what masks do is that generally, if you don't wear a mask, that's why they tell you 6 feet apart, social
Yep,
distancing.
yep.
What the mask allows you to do is change that 6 feet to around 2 feet, right? Because
Mhm.
the mask doesn't let your viral particles spread farther than it does. It kills it with the mask and then lets it hit to the head down faster than if you didn't have a mask. So that's what really that's the benefit of the mask. And as you're saying, those who don't have a mask, put us who are wearing masks at risk. But it has been shown to dramatically reduce. If everybody wears a mask, it will
Oh yeah.
dramatically reduce transmissions of the virus. That's just the fact, and that's just the mechanics of how we breathe. And you can go to the CDC's website; they'll even show you. So when people say, I think you're 100% correct. Wearing a mask helps other people, but the fact that they're wearing a mask helps you. So it's a reciprocal thing. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
yes. But that's why. So when Trump wouldn't wear it, what bugged me was it's like, I mean, I see not wearing it as sort of the ultimate fu to the people around you, because it's sort of like, I don't care. The people around you are wearing masks and you're not. And it's sort of like, if you want to do something stupid, and if you want to not wear a seatbelt, if you want to endanger yourself in some way or another, go ahead. That's perfectly fine. But when you're not wearing a mask, it's sort of like you're really endangering. And so it was, Trump, by not wearing them. So I noticed a lot of news coverage says, oh, and he wasn't wearing a mask, as if that's why he got COVID. Really, it's that Hope Hicks wasn't wearing a mask, and that's most likely that most likely reason he got COVID was because Hope Hicks wasn't wearing a mask. And anyone who gets COVID around Trump now, most likely will be because Trump wasn't wearing a mask. But I think you really did hit. So
No.
I want to cover a couple of interesting points, because I think you hit a couple of. So you're right. And again, my brain is still waking. But the reality is, and we talked about this before, the U.S. has 4% of the world's population, but right now we're hovering at about
Mhm.
20% of the mortality for COVID. And it looks like those numbers are probably higher, because those numbers only count people that we've tested after they've died, not necessarily, yeah, people have died without. So long story, but it's at a minimum, we have
Mhm.
20% of cases for. So it hasn't been handled well. Objectively, it hasn't been handled well. So anything he can do to get off that narrative, and that's really what he's been focusing on a lot, is just ignoring, denying. Now he's got it. Presumably he's going to quarantine. He says he's going to quarantine. He is now in quarantine. Whether or not he sticks to it is, I mean, I'll $50 anybody right now. He ain't going to stick to it, and he's going to. But so I think you're right. This puts back in the one narrative that he doesn't want. But if he starts to get seriously sick, and let's not say life threatening, but certainly seriously sick, that's going to start probably in about 2 or 3 weeks. That'll last for about 2 or 3 weeks. So that'll last through the election. So people are going to start to ask. The VP is going to become a lot more important now. People are going to start to look a lot more at vice presidents. And the one thing that Pence has over Trump. Now, the funny thing is, I align politically much more with Trump than I do with Pence. I dislike Pence's ideology far more than I dislike Trump's. On the flip side, Pence is competent. That's what I if I had a choice between the two, I would vote for Pence. And the reason is because Pence is competent. Trump is not. So we've seen the effects. I mean, Pence would not subvert NATO. I mean, Pence would not, start talking to a 7-year-old about, hey, there's the nuclear football, and we want the nuclear codes. I mean, I wish that was a joke. But that was early on, and we've forgotten what shit he did. I mean, that was early on.
Well, but even with this, right?
Yeah.
One thing about your premise, I agree with, but I think you have an even more dramatic problem if Trump gets ill. All right.
Yes.
So let's say 14 days asymptomatic and he recovers. That's horrible in of itself. But let's say you get 10 days and he starts getting ill, right? He has to go to a hospital, go on a ventilator, what have you. The problem is that you're going into an election with the president who could be, for all intents and purposes, some people are going to think he's on his deathbed, right? He's got COVID and he's sick. That's a difference. A 74-year-old being sick with COVID going into election day. Those people are going to say, are we now voting for Pence or are we voting for Trump? That's a different story. That's a different ballgame. And that's what Trump is a strong man. Go ahead.
Well, that's sort of my point is I think most people in the Republican Party actually the never Trumpers. If it was if it was Pence versus Biden, they'd vote Pence. Many of the never Trumpers would vote Pence if it was Pence versus Biden. They just won't vote Trump.
Yes.
They'll vote Biden if it's Biden Trump. So if all of a sudden, it realistically looks like it may be Pence on the table, I'm thinking that's the only possible saving grace. I don't know that it's sufficient to overcome. I think a lot of people are going to be worried about. But all of a sudden, at least in people's minds, Trump may be off the table for the exact reason you said. No matter how sick he is or isn't, oh my God, he's on his deathbed. That's going to be that's what people are going to be thinking about. And they're like, I'm really voting for Pence. And I think a lot of people find that more palatable.
But what about those? Because a lot of people fail to realize elections aren't won by by your base, right? If everybody in Trump's base voted for Trump, he would lose the election because he still needs those independents and moderates to switch to vote for him, right? The same thing with the Democrats. If their base just voted, they lose. So you need to convince those people in the middle. And if those people think that you're not going to survive, I think you lose a lot of those people who are just going to say, who are on the fence, who are like, I'm 50-50 Trump. Well, he may not make it anyway. Let me cast this vote for Biden. I do understand Trump's whole game plan is I'm a strong man, I'm invincible. And if I don't see how he can win an election going in, being hospitalized, even on a ventilator or something like that. And God forbid any of that happens. But I think at Trump's best case scenario is he's asymptomatic in 14 days. He's back on the campaign trail.
Yes.
That is a disaster. Worst case scenario, he gets sick. And on election day, people don't know if he's going to survive. That I think is I don't see how he can win the election because it's going to be hard for people to cast a vote for a person they don't know is healthy. That's why you take all these exams and all that stuff before election day, right? That's why how is his health? Oh, he's got a good heart. Oh, what's his doctor say about him? Now you got somebody going in 74 years old with possibly a terminal illness, if it comes down to that, if he actually gets sick. So I don't know. I think it changes the dynamics of the race. And I think you're right about the Pence thing. I think but Pence is not you're not pulling the lever for president for Pence. You're pulling it for Trump.
I think that's a good point. I think my conclusion would be, I think you probably would see some boost for people who are sitting there going, "Hey, I like Pence," and maybe they're going to be thinking this is really Pence, not Trump. But I think you're right; he's going to lose more than he would gain by a significant margin. I think that's a good because look, he's sick, and he's got that strongman mentality, and nothing undermines that than being on a ventilator, which of course he's not yet. But I'd like to point out, so just quickly for the people just joining us. Just to recap what's happened at about 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I still can't believe this. Some of what is being called by some news outlets some of the most shocking news in the Eastern Hemisphere. Eastern, sorry, that's Western. Wow. In the Western Hemisphere is Donald Trump and his wife Melania have confirmed that they have COVID-19. That this would make them obviously the largest leaders. Are the ostensibly the most prominent leaders to get it in since this has started. The second up until now would be Boris Johnson, which I do want to talk about briefly. He contracted it ostensibly from Hope Hicks, who tested positive after she tested positive due to her close proximity to the president and the fact that she wasn't wearing a mask for much of that time. The president and Melania were tested. Both came back positive. Even knowing she was positive, he continued to travel to New Jersey with her and has been doing all of his regular activities. He has not been wearing a mask. And according to the CDC, Trump is in the second most, what's the word I'm looking for? He's in the, I'm sorry, what?
Vulnerable?
Vulnerable. Yeah. Thank you. He's in the 65 to 74. He's 74. So 65 to 74 is one of the most vulnerable groups. They have 5 times greater risk of hospitalization, 90 times greater risk of death, and he is also clinically obese and has moderate heart disease. So all of these things are mitigating factors. Now, Boris Johnson, as I recall, was in. They're very similar fellows, but he appeared to be in roughly similar shape, and what ended up happening to him, of course, was for the first week he did seem perfectly fine, and he was talking about, hey, this is really not that big a deal, and here you go, and then he ended up hospitalized. He ended up on a ventilator, and it looked like it was actually very close there for a while. They were already talking about secession, which they didn't have a formal plan for, and they prepared to implement it. Boris Johnson was 54, so he's a lot younger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of those same triggers that Trump has too, overweight, it's. But again, let's just 95 or 94% of the people, even in that age group, survive when they get it. So yes. It's not like it's not like this is like 90% of the people in that age group. But it's just the risk factors, especially with the risk factors. Obviously, we're talking about possibilities and probabilities here. So, Trump does seem to be. I wouldn't want to get it if I was Trump, but I also think you have no matter what happens going forward. I think if Trump does have to back out, because it's all about the timing of this. This is October 2nd. Yeah. Think about where we're at in the process. This is October 2nd, and we're talking about the president becoming positive with COVID-19 October 2nd. And, this is where most people in campaign season change their minds at the last minute. In those last 30 days to maybe last 15 days. And some people even go into the voting booth not knowing who they're going to vote for and change it at that particular time. So a lot of people who are changing their minds are changing it now. I think the Biden campaign has been given a gift. And that gift is Trump is so incompetent. Again, I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying the gift that this is going to be for Joe Biden.
The narrative
that they get to say, yes, it's going to be, this is Trump's incompetence that's gone home to roost. Look at the way the White House, look, his wife got it, his staff's got it, his this got it. This is his incompetence. This is his negligence, as a leader. This is why he can't campaign. That's the Biden. I can see the ads right now, right? Those are the ads. And I don't know how Trump is going to counteract that. Because what can he say? Unless he's going to be, he's going to be locked up in a bunker trying to do something on camera. But that's just not, I don't think it's going to, I'm honestly more interested to see how the Trump campaign responds to this. Because this is a disaster. This is, I don't think, when you talk about October surprises, I don't think there's been even anything close to something like this. This changes the game. I think this changes the game.
Yep. Well, so, Oh Jesus! Now I just lost my my train of thought. Excuse. Well, okay. So let me make a quick announcement too. We've got for those of you who are just joining us, we just did a rundown. We'll do another rundown of what the news is. But long story short, Trump and his wife has COVID. I do actually remember what I was going to say. I'll get to that in a second. We're going to be doing we're going to be watching. I think it's November 3rd. In Time is going to be
Election night.
covering. Yes, we're going to be covering the elections. Nate, I hope you will join us. We are also going to have from Fundamentally Flawed. Alex Botten, I think is the pronoun.
Is he still around?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I know Alex Button.
we're gonna have him, and with any luck, we're also gonna have Jim Gardner and Christopher Mouty will all be with us to discuss it. So I hope Nate, you will join us and round out the panel. And so we've got a number of questions, and so a couple of things. I we'll address the false flag. I think your opinion and my opinion is going to be the same on that. I will say the other thing is too, the really clever ones, I suppose, too, would sit there and they're not going to talk about Trump having COVID. They're going to talk about Melania having COVID because she got it from him, and so they sit there and say Trump can't even protect his own. Yeah.
Breaking news! I'm breaking it right now. The Fox News has just come out and said Melania has tested negative this morning for COVID-19.
Oh,
that's Fox
okay.
News reporting that right now. So I'm not sure
right.
because I'm assuming if they're going to put it out, they probably tested them multiple times. But Fox News is saying right now, I'm watching Fox and Friends. They're saying Melania has tested negative this morning.
All right. Thank you. Let me go look at that. So what we have is the okay, first
But again,
lady
they're saying
resilience from White House. Yeah, okay. There's mixed results. Yeah, let me take a look at this. So the tweet this morning was from Trump. I'll get the tweet. Trump said that he and her both had it, and that confirms a report from, I forget which news outlet. It was a major media. I want to say Bloomberg. That reported that they had insider information that both he and Melania had tested positive. He released on Twitter. I mean, this is the ostensibly the leader of the free world. You now have to use ostensibly with quotes within quotes within quotes, and then maybe more quotes because of what Trump has done to the U.S. standing in the world. But ostensibly leader of the free world. And he released it on Twitter. But he's in one of the higher risk groups. And let me look at what I'm. Trump and lady. Okay.
Now I got to correct the correct. So Fox News has corrected that now.
Okay.
So Melania still tested positive, but what they're saying is Mike Pence and the second lady, his wife, they put first lady, but it's the second lady supposedly. Yeah. But his wife Karen Pence tests negative for coronavirus.
That's what we get for looking at Fox News.
They made a mistype.
Yeah. All right. So we're okay. So and then Melania as too many Americans have done this year. POTUS and I are quarantining at home after testing positive for COVID-19. We are feeling good. I have postponed all upcoming engagements. Please stay safe, and we will get through this together. Again, the Baltimore Health Commissioner has said that she expects it's going to be another week before they develop symptoms, another week or 2 weeks before it gets really bad, if that's where they're going to go. That's usually about how long it takes before people get bad. Again, that's what happened with Boris Johnson.
Hold on.
So, yeah.
Hold on, but there are a couple of assumptions that I think the audience should be aware that we're making. Number one,
yes.
Assumption number one that we're making is that he got it from Hope Hicks. That's an assumption, right? It could actually be reversed. Trump could have been asymptomatic and could be at the end of his trial, for all we know, right? Now, I'm assuming he gets tested regularly, but if, let's say, he got infected and infected Hope Hicks, and he's been asymptomatic. Now, one of the things that's made me think that he may not be asymptomatic is because of his debate performance. Even his staffers were saying that his throat seemed a little more raspy and he seemed a little bit more irritable and things of that nature. So, but that's reading the tea leaves. And the second thing is, if he just got infected recently, because I think there's how long does it take for you to get from infection to positive test? It takes 3 days, right? Where you're infected and then you get tested positive.
I forget. That sounds about right, but I forget the actual. Yeah.
So assuming that, then right now, I think the safest thing is to do a 14-day quarantine. But he could be finished with, he could have resolved the virus, as they say, resolved the virus, but he could be finished with he could have recovered in 10 days. He can be recovering in a couple of days. So it really depends on how often has he been tested. I'm assuming he's tested frequently and when they believe he got it. So right now, all that we can really say is Trump is positive at this date, and the standard is 14 days. That I think is something you can't avoid. I don't think the president can avoid
Yep.
it.
Yep.
And even if he tests negative in 10 days, he still would have to wait the full 14 days because he still could be contagious, where he can still infect other people. So that's what we're really talking about here.
Well, and most of these tests, so the latest test that I heard that's most often used has a 30% false negative rate, but is considered to have no false positives. So if he has a positive, then a negative, they're still going to go with the positive. Once you've
Yeah.
got that positive, it's 14 days, period. It doesn't matter how many more tests he's got. It doesn't matter what happens at this point. 14 days minimum. That's very true about Hope Hicks. That's an assumption, and that's going by. So he does get tested regularly. His the White House medical officer, the White House doctor,
The doctor.
yeah, isn't saying how. He won't say how often. We'll just say it's regular and that he's the most tested man in America. Okay, great. But what happened was it was after Hope Hicks was tested positive, he received a new test. So I don't know how often. I mean, let's assume he's getting it like let's say every 3 days. That would mean then 3 days ago ostensibly he tested negative, now tested positive. You're right. It's not the what is it? Post hoc ergo propter hoc. We don't know just because he was tested after her who got it first. I think that's important, but it looks like he probably got it from her, but I think that's a very good, we don't know, and we don't know how long he's had it, and best case scenario, he's had it for a while, but since this is the test, you're right, it's 14 days, so he could be at the tail end of it. It's unlikely
Yeah,
given
yeah.
how often he seems to be tested, but we do not know. All we know, you're correct, is he now has a positive test with Melania.
Yeah,
Um,
because if the doctor came out and said, "Hey, we tested him on this day, this day, this day, and he was negative, and now we just tested him today," then I think you can start making those, drawing some inferences. But until we know when was his last negative test, then it kind of just throws it up in the air because from that point on, he could have got infected right after that test. The guy testing him could have infected him or whatever. So, and just being just being facetious, but it's interesting. I think the issue here is that if you see what was happening at the White House, these protocols to keep people safe weren't in place, right?
correct.
The masks weren't in place, right? This
Yes.
wasn't in place, and this is what increased the risk factors of these transmissions. Because let's not forget, it's the first lady, it's the president, it's his staff, it's the senators, it's all these people who are around the president. Because the thought process of the White House was the president is in more or less a bubble. There's a bubble around the president, and that bubble consisted of all of his. So Hope Hicks and all these people were always getting tested around him, and then when they get to him, it was like, okay, well, none of these people are positive, so I'm safe. That didn't seem to work. That's why they weren't wearing masks. But I think the secondary precaution of social distancing, wearing masks, is just in case that bubble bursts, something fails, like it did in this case, where she's infected and she got in, assuming that this is what happened. Now the president is just like everyone else. He's in a closed environment with somebody who's positive and is in close quarters. That it's a recipe for disaster. That's why the CDC says wear a mask and social distance just in case this happens, and it happened, unfortunately.
Well, and the First Lady of the United States is going to have an entire staff. Now, she's been much better about wearing a mask, so presumably her staff is going to be much less likely to get it. But the amount of staff it takes to support both of those people is really rather high, and especially where in the White House, you're right, they weren't following any of the precautions. What we have now too is it looks like so there was an event planned for Florida today. That event's been canceled. He has now canceled events on Monday and Tuesday, and it looks like they will be canceling all events up through the October 15th debate in Miami, which has not yet been canceled, but I don't see how he's going to do it. I don't see how
Well, if
he's
you're
going to
Joe
do it.
Biden, number one, if you're Joe Biden, do you cancel that debate? I
Absolutely
think we should
not.
get out of
I'd be like, hey, I'm ready to go. You offer your condolences and say, let's hope he recovers, and I'll happily step aside for that debate if that's what he needs. Anything that makes it seem
Yeah,
like
but
he's a Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is just going off the news. The media reports are saying that Joe Biden does not want to debate Trump, right? Because he loses debates, right? He's not, about Joe Biden losing his mind and all this stuff, that he doesn't want to be on the debate stage. So if that's true, assuming that premise is true, then this is a get out of debate free card, right? We just had this monstrous debate. The guy is sick. The guy exposed me on stage, right? He's screaming at me on stage,
Yep.
spitting across the room,
Yep.
and now he, I need 2 positive tests before I get on stage with him again. And we're talking about having a debate now 2 weeks before the election. 2 weeks before the election, we were talking about having this last debate. And if you can cancel that one, what do you do?
You don't want to. You want to force him to be the one to cancel it, though. I mean, I know it's a game of chicken, but you want to force him to be the one to cancel it. So you sit there and say, "Look, I'm ready. I'm happy to do it. I'm good to go. I'm in my prime for this. I've been prepping. I'm ready if and when he is. But I'll be magnanimous, and if he can't do it, I completely understand. We'll postpone it. Makes him out to be the good guy. It makes now the only minor downside is if it turns out Trump decides to go. You always want to lower expectations before a debate. You want to make it seem like oh wow, he's so much better at debating than I am, and he's so much. If you're making the other side look worse, if you're making the other side, Trump is sick. Maybe I'll let Trump decide, but this is, and then Trump shows up and then kicks Biden's ass. That's a real problem. But I don't think that's going to happen. So if Biden can't do it because it's sort of like, what, you won't even debate a sick guy? Let Trump be the one to cancel it.
Yeah.
All right. So just to
well,
catch everybody up. Oh, was there something?
No. I was listening to you. Sorry.
All right. So to catch everybody up, at roughly 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Trump released a tweet that said that he and the First Lady had tested positive for COVID-19. He is in one of the higher risk groups, being 74 years old. He's at the very top of that risk group. He's almost moved into the highest risk group just based on age. He also has a couple other compounding factors that look like he is at greater risk. It looks like, and Nate did point out that this is just sort of, a conclusion we're reaching based on assumptions. So we don't know, but it looks like he got it from Hope Hicks. It looks like he's still early on in the illness. If he is, it is expected he will start to develop symptoms in about a week. And if it's gonna be difficult for him, he's going to develop the severe symptoms in about a week to 2 weeks after that. By the way, too, we do, if you want to have any comments, if you want to get a comment straight to us, Super Chat's always the easiest way to do that. We also are just taking any comments in the live chat. We're putting them up on the screen. And Twitter. We are live on Twitter. We're on Periscope. If you just hashtag In Time Show, we will get those comments and we can put those up on the show. But, if you're here and if you've been enjoying the show, please like and subscribe. It really does help. Please support the channel. And we are looking to do with Fundamentally Flawed's Alex Botton and Jim Gardner, and hopefully with Nate, if he's going to be available. Election night, we will be doing coverage from starting about a half hour to an hour before the polls close, and going as long as it takes, as long as it's not another Bush v. Gore, in which case yeah.
About the legal aspect of this, let's say, we're correct. Trump does get sick. He starts showing those symptoms and he needs to be hospitalized. Like Boris Yeltsin, he goes through the same kind of track. Number one, what about the 25th Amendment?
Yes.
Do you now, for those of you who don't know the 25th Amendment, after John F. Kennedy's assassination, the country passed the 25th Amendment, where it just said if the president was disabled, you can have an acting president. So you wouldn't have the succession of the vice president actually becoming president, but the vice president would become more or less an acting president. And what would happen is the president could either give a letter to Congress saying that he's incapacitated, and then the vice president would become acting president for that short amount of time. It's happened 3 times in the United States. When Reagan got shot, and twice with Bush, George W. Bush, when he had colonoscopies. So then Vice President Cheney actually became acting president on those 2 occasions. So if Trump does get sick, where he can't run the government, then you do have the trigger of the 25th Amendment. But Trump would actually have to trigger that. And then there's a second way you can trigger that, where you'd get the cabinet, and the cabinet would vote, and then they would say, well, the president is incapacitated, the vice president would become acting president, and then when the president recovers, he can then. So do you think if it gets that bad, do you think Trump they would trigger the 25th Amendment?
I don't think Trump is going to write the letter. I don't think Trump is going to sit there because he's going to see it as a sign of weakness. So I don't think he's going to tell Congress, "Hey, I'm passing it to Pence." I just don't think he's going to. I don't. There is nothing in his behavior that, in my view, expresses that level of concern for the country. It's all about his image and what he does, and that's going to undermine that. So I don't think he's going to write a letter to that effect. So then the question is the cabinet going to pull the trigger on it? And there was some thought when Trump was really starting, when he first took office and he was starting to act crazy. It sounded like there were members of the cabinet who were considering pulling the trigger on the 25th. Because the thing is, he doesn't have to be sick physically for the cabinet to pull the trigger on the 25th. They can just sit there and they can pull the trigger on the 25th, essentially removing him from power until they decide to give it back to him. Actually, I forget how he gets it back. I forget whether it's Congress and or the VP can return it. But at any rate, I don't see them doing that either, because they know that that's the one thing that kind of, he's going to see that as disloyalty. And, when he recovers, he's going to make every member of his cabinet pay for it. So now the cabinet, usually, actually, if I recall, it's customary for the cabinet to resign or at least send letters of resignation at the end of the first term. They send it to the second term so that he can just accept them for anybody he doesn't want. He doesn't have to fire them. He's just got a letter of resignation from every member of the cabinet. If he wants to keep them, he tears it up. If he doesn't want to keep them, he's like, oh, they resigned, and everybody, he'll just accept all the letters. I mean, it's just not, you're done. Best case
Everybody.
scenario. Yeah, everybody. Resignations for everybody. So I don't think they're going to pull the trigger on that. What do you think?
But this is why timing is so important. We're talking about the 25th Amendment 1 month before election.
Jesus, yeah.
Right?
Oh,
and we're talking about a legitimate
yeah.
usage of the 25th Amendment 1 month before election day. That's why I say this is a horror show for the campaign. Is Trump going to be okay? All of these things. And now we're talking about, well, what about Pence in the 25th? Like, how worse could it possibly go for this Republican candidate? But Trump is resilient. One thing I will always say, you can't count this guy out, because every time you think he's on his last leg, this guy comes up like Rocky. He should play Eye of the Tiger,
Yep. Yeah, but Rocky lost in the end, so let's hope that. But at any rate, I'm sorry. What?
But what do you mean? Rocky was champ. I remember Rocky 3. Rocky was.
No, I'm talking right? The first movie. The first movie is the only one that counts.
Oh my God! No, go ahead.
So two things. So first of all, we've been getting a lot of questions about false flag. What's the likelihood that this is fake? So I want to ask about that. But then the second thing is, there is one other very, very serious consequence we haven't talked about: the Supreme Court nomination. How's this going to affect that? Because now he doesn't necessarily. Once he does the nomination, technically he's done. He's done, and that goes to the Senate. They do their whole process, but their goal was to get that process done as quickly as possible. And even though the result is basically a foregone conclusion, everybody knows that she's going to get confirmed. The problem is they weren't sure they could do it by January 7th. So the question is, this can't speed up the process.
Well, to be honest with you, if we just take it out from this, I think Trump's piece of it is over, right? His piece of it is over. You've nominated a woman, let the Senate go. But I think the political aspect of it is twofold. Number one, what about those senators that Trump was hanging out with all this time, right? Because he had a whole bunch of senators with him just a couple of days ago, no mask, very close proximity, and he was likely positive with the virus at that particular time. And Hope Hicks was around these same people too. So now you got maybe 5 or 6 Republican senators who've been exposed to a virus. Can they even go and have the hearings, unless they're going to do it on Skype, they may be sick. So now you're talking about, that aspect of it. And then the second one, if Trump really does get sick, the politics of it become different, right? Now you have this guy who's sick, is it his pick and all this stuff, even though, to be honest with you, if I'm Mitch McConnell and the Republicans, I push this pick through. Let me just not even make any bones about it. If I'm the Republicans, this pick is going through before January 6th, before we get a new Congress. That it just does not make sense not to do that, right?
Yep.
Even if you believe, and now I think it makes that even more adamant for us to do that, because Trump, who knows what's going to happen with Trump, right? Who knows what's going to happen? But a Supreme Court pick from a young woman who's going to probably serve a generation on the court, you fill that seat. You fill that seat. So I think it makes it even more imperative that seat be filled. Go ahead.
No, I agree. I just think that usually in these processes, you're right. After the Trump nominates, he's officially out of it, but usually the president still stumps. The president calls in favors. The president does whatever they can to speed up the process, and that's usually trying to help the Senate and helping whoever's wrangling this, which in this case would be McConnell, to wheel and deal and get things done as quickly as possible, because everybody's going to want something out of this, and everyone's going to want to appease their constituents, because yes, they want her on, but they want her on and to pass their elections. They're all up for election. Yeah. They want it. So now that's a lot harder, and I think you have a lot of senators who are saying, okay, I don't have cover from the president in the same way I did, because he's kneecapped and out of things for at least 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, it's a horror show. I keep saying it, but I really don't think people understand how much of a horror show this is, because you build campaigns. Campaigns just don't start overnight, right? You build campaigns on principles, right? Principle that we're turning the corner with the virus. The virus isn't as bad as it sort of was. I'm protected. I'm strong. Remember, he was taking hydroxychloroquine because he thought he may have been exposed by the valet. Yeah. But even though he said he was. So is he taking it now? Because he never said that. So is he going to take it now? It gets to the point now where don't get me wrong, I think Trump is in a better position now in terms of medical treatment, because now you have some other some treatments out there.
There's a couple
for
of
instance,
different drugs,
the plasma treatment. The plasma treatment is which he's probably going. He's got the best treatment, but I think the optics. The problem here is the optics and the timing. Optics and timing. And I will say this: it's beneficial that this didn't happen 10 days from now, because if it wiped him out until election day, but now you have his window for campaigning has turned in from a month before the election, where you had all these things planned, to maybe 2 weeks, and possibly even shorter time than that. That's what you're really talking about. That's what I'm saying. And Pence, I don't think can do Trump. I don't think no one's out there going to go pull the trigger for Pence, right? Nobody's out there voting for Pence. And I don't believe. I do understand what you're talking about the never Trumpers.
Yeah.
But they're not going out there voting for Pence, right? They know Trump is on the ticket, so that would be a vote for Trump, unless Trump is just not on the ticket. So I don't know. I think at this point this is just a disaster. This is an October surprise. This is a bomb. How do you overcome it? How do you know? I don't know.
Well,
what would you do? I'm asking people in the chat. What would you if you were President Trump's team? What would be your next move?
That's a really good question. Although I do have one answer, and I think we need to consider this. I think I do see the Republicans doing this, and I think that's it would be a surprise. But just hear me out. Kanye 2020. He was on. I saw that picture of him on Mount Rushmore. Yeah, he was on Mount Rushmore. So obviously, he's still running. You do know what party he ran under, right? You know what party he ran under?
What? He was under the Republicans, right?
No.
Or was he Democrats, or what was he doing?
The birthday party.
I don't know. I wasn't following.
I'm not kidding.
I don't follow Kanye. I know. I believe you. Kanye, but Kanye came out and said he was doing that to help Trump to siphon votes from the Democrats for Trump. So maybe that's going to work. I think anybody. I think Kanye's. He has some money and we wanted to get some fame. That's fine. He does that. But I think right now the moderates are the problem that Trump's got, because now he's been selling the story about we turning a corner, and the corner now has turned into a brick wall that now you gotta kind of climb over. So have we turned the corner on coronavirus? It doesn't seem like it. His whole staff, multiple people in his staff are now infected. It's a horror show. This is a horror show, and his wife too.
Well, I
think Boris Nelson's wife, she didn't. Oh, but it shows you they were socially distancing. But it was funny because I had a friend of mine when I was chatting with him earlier. He was saying, well, he was like, well, you could tell Trump still, Trump and the wife still get the good love in it, because she got infected like as soon as he got infected. So they weren't socially
yelling.
distancing.
They're yelling so much at each other. Is going to be my view. But No, you had said something earlier too, which I think was very important. Then I'll do another rundown, and we'll see because I think that's do want to see what the live chat has to say. But the they say on campaigns, you're absolutely right. So first of all, it's about building momentum. A campaign can't build overnight, and these are huge, slow machines. These are behemoths that basically take forever to change. So if you got to change course, you're in very big trouble. That's why you try to get it right just from the get go. But the they also every day that gets closer, each day becomes more important until the day of the election, which a lot of people say, oh, it's already decided. So if you're running campaign volunteers, it's really hard to get people to come in on the last day because they all say, oh, I'm going to vote and it's already decided. It's not going to matter anymore, and people just don't want to keep putting in that kind of energy because they get exhausted. But the reality is, what they say is, if you're going to volunteer for just one day, make it election day. That's the day they want all their volunteers. That's the day they want everybody coming in and going out, getting out the vote, getting everybody to go into election day. And it's just that if it's going to be 2 days, it's the day before and the day of. And so he's losing each day that he loses, the closer and closer we get, it just does more and more damage. And so this is, yeah, if this had come in another 10 days, but I don't know. I mean, they're obviously going to have to play it by ear. But if he's too sick to do the debate, I think you're right. That looks bad, and I do think that posing. I think we're going to start to see the ads of Melania and saying, "Look, Trump. How can Trump protect the United States? Couldn't even protect his own wife. She's sick
Oh
now
my
because
God, they're
he."
gonna be vicious.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
They're gonna be vicious. Yeah, he,
So
he he couldn't protect. He couldn't protect his family. He couldn't protect his
yeah.
family. How could he protect the country? They weren't social distant, and you're going to see the pictures of him with all these other people with no mask on. With this, the campaign ads write themselves, and I think it's good for it's good for people to say, we wish the president best health. I hope he's asymptomatic and just flies over this. No, I, I unfortunately think some people are wishing the worst for this president, which I think is ridiculous, and I think people should be called out. People who are hoping that, because this is a human being, and he has this virus, and there's got to be some fear there, about his age group and all this. And Trump himself said this is kind of like rolling the dice, and I am concerned for him, as I think any sane person would be, and I hope him the best. But I also think this is a lesson that could be learned: is that you can't roll the dice all the time and always win. And sometimes you do, and it just doesn't. And I'll ask you a question, Nick. Do you think if they would have practiced proper social distancing and mask wearing, do you think it would have been less likely that Trump would have contracted this virus?
Oh, I know for a fact it would have been less likely. I can't say for a fact he wouldn't have got it. He may still have gotten it, but the chances are a lot less.
Yeah.
If he had, if you take a look at Biden, he started wearing the mask right away. If you take a look at Obama, you could tell his view was, you do what the doctors say, you do what the experts say. That's why you have experts. That's the whole point of experts. And he for the most part did take that direction very well. So I would imagine, had Obama been in office, you'd have seen you don't get into the White House without a mask on. You don't get, and it's just these complete, we don't care that this is the center of democracy, or whatever it is that you want to call it. No exceptions. And with Trump, everything's the exception, and he's the exception, and so he gets to. So yeah, he would have, the chances would have been a lot less. He still could have gotten it. There's nothing that reduces the chance to zero. But yeah, that's my view. How about you?
Yeah, I honestly think, let's say, for instance, let's go with the premise that Hope Hicks actually transmitted it to him. If you practice social distancing, right, she's staying 6 feet away, and they both wear masks, I think that greatly reduces the chance of transmission, right? It just does. And then you have an actual bubble. And then, for instance, you test her and she does come out positive, then you start your other mitigation. Because again, the way COVID's being battled, with the way we're battling COVID, is in two distinct steps. One, you want to prevent people from being exposed to the virus, and that's what they were doing with Trump. And the way you prevent exposure is 6 feet apart, wear a mask, right? You try to isolate people from the virus. That's why you had to stay at home orders. You stay at home, and then people who are infected will never infect you because you're in isolation, right? And you hope that after 14 days, those people would stop becoming infectious and will be okay. So that's the first. That's the first thing. And then the second thing that they want you to do is, let's say you've been exposed. You've touched the a surface that has the virus. So they tell you to wash your hands. Wash your hands frequently. Don't touch your face and stuff like that. That second piece is mitigating an exposure. You don't want an exposure to become an infection. So you've been exposed, now you don't want it to become an infection. So those are the two things that's the two reasons why doctors say, first, we don't want you to get exposed, but even if you're exposed, then we don't want that exposure to turn into an infection. So right now we have the issue where it seems like Trump was exposed, but that exposure turned into an infection for some reason. At this point, I think if his doctors and people are understanding that, I don't know how this could have happened in this particular environment, because you have the most important person on the planet understanding that these are the risks that involved. And when you look at the pictures of him and Hope Hicks right before, a couple of days ago, they are almost nose to nose, with each other. That to me is not understanding. We got the most important person on the planet being with someone who's been exposed to the virus and is in direct contact. That, I think, if you practice the proper social distancing, and you practice mask wearing, then I don't think you have that exposure. Assuming that he got it from Hope Hicks, he could have gotten that. Now, there's something that came up this morning, I think on 4chan, where people say, well, he might have gotten it from Joe Biden. So they telling people that Joe Biden should get tested to see if he got it from Joe Biden. So, but we'll see. We'll see. It just is. There was, what was that conspiracy theory that you said that people were saying recently?
Well, the only one the only one I was going to bring up is that people were thinking that this may be a false flag, and that what's happening is that uh, he's just doing this to get sympathy. He's just doing this, which no, no, I don't believe that. But I did want to get your view on that, and then I do have this. So we'll put this up on the screen. The memorandum from the president's physician, saying that they have been tested from and have now confirmed that they have SARS-CoV 2, which is also usually referred to as COVID-19 virus. So we'll get that up in a second. But so, yeah, there's a lot of people saying, I don't believe this. I think he's just doing this to get sympathy votes. But I think the damage it does far outweighs the sympathy. I mean, you'll get some sympathy, but no, most of it's going to be. So, and then I did want to address something else you said. But so what are your thoughts on that? Or were you talking about a different conspiracy?
No. For them to put this out damages the campaign tremendously. Because let's forget, he can't do anything for 14 days. He's just had to cancel 5 or 6 campaign rallies that he can't go to now because of COVID-19. So if you think that he's just doing this for sympathy, then that's he's playing 7D chess, because I don't see the positive part of it. So that's just it. But what was the second thing you were saying?
Well, no. So the other one I just wanted to clarify. In this country, ostensibly the gamble is that the great experiment is going to work, and that's what we believe in. And if that's what we believe in, then you believe in your party second. You believe in this country first, and your party second. And that's why when you have Republicans who stand up and say, "Hey, listen, Trump's not qualified. You can't vote for," I'm saying they're going, "Okay, these are people who put country first, party second." And because of that, I am really not a fan of Trump. People who've seen my work know I'm not a fan of Trump by any stretch of the
No, hey,
imagination.
me too. I am obviously not a fan. Like I've always say, I'm not voting for Trump. And most people know that. So,
But you still have to
I
put
am a Democrat.
the country first and the office first, which means
Yes,
we
yes.
all have to, and I think you pointed out, and also the human being first. So I think we all have to say, look, he is the. Oh, I have a hard time even saying that, but he is the president. It took me 2 years before I was even willing to say that, quite frankly. Um,
Damn.
but oh yeah, well no, we had a poll on my personal blog. I did a poll to see what we should call him, and it was um, something grabber in chief. I will leave it at that. That was
Oh
the
my
title that,
God.
yeah. So grabber in chief. At any rate, we had to do the in chief because he deserved the honorific. But at any rate, despite that, you have to hope he does well. Obviously, you hope he loses the election if you don't like him, but you have to hope he does well and he gets through this because that's what's important. And in the end, that's going to be important to any of us who get it, and those of us who've been through it. You know that he recovers is the first and most important thing. And again, especially because he is, for better or worse, our great experiment has put him as the leader, and it's going to happen. Sometimes you win the election, sometimes you lose it. So, I wanted to make
Yeah.
that clear.
Well, well, but just because, like again, most people know I'm not voting for Trump. I'm not. I'm definitely not a Trump supporter. But I do think in our polarized society, we fail to realize there are good things on both sides, right? Like I think some of Trump's policies have been good, super juicing the economy, low black unemployment. Like I can list off a whole bunch of great things that Trump has done while he's president, but then I can also list off a whole bunch of horrible things that he's done as president. And I think each person has to kind of evaluate the job that the person does when they're voting for someone, right? Because I think without COVID, I think Trump it's an easy win election for Trump if the economy continued to do exactly what it was, because the economy was doing so well, and Trump was the driving force behind that, right? Those tax cuts, super juicing the economy. There were the lowest black unemployment rate, the lowest Hispanic unemployment rate, the lowest. Now, COVID blew all that up, so now you had this different figure. So I am definitely not a fan of the president, but I do understand that there are some good things and bad things that he's done. And now I do hope that he does not win the election. But if he does win, I don't think it's the end of the world. You know what I'm saying? I think the United States is strong enough to even if you do have someone who I believe personally may not be up to the job, but I think our institutions are strong enough to overcome that. With that said, I think this test result is an indictment on two things. It's an indictment on the way the virus has been handled, and I think it's an indictment on Trump as a leader himself. Because what people are going to say is that this shows that the mixed messages that he's been showing: wear a mask, don't wear a mask, social distance, don't social distance, open schools, don't open schools, that now all comes into question, because you want consistency, you want a consistent message, especially in such a horrible situation, and you haven't gotten that from the president, unfortunately. And I think this is just the icing on the cake. And again, like we've been saying, it's about politics, and it's about how you can spend this. And I think it's hard to spend. I think it's easy for Biden to spend, because you're going to see he can't protect his
Yep,
family, he
yep.
can't protect the White House, he can't protect his staff, and he can't protect you. They're going to run that ad. But what's the counter to that? And that's what I'm trying. That's what I always try to figure. What can we say to counter that? And I don't know. I don't know what you can say.
I'm
I don't know
curious.
what you can say.
We've got a lot of people in the live chat. Hopefully, someone will come up with something. There's got to be something creative. I mean, there are people whose sole job it is to come up with counters to those kinds of narratives. Actually, there's a couple of classes of political operative that doesn't. There's also somebody, what are they called? Whose job it is to come, lawyers,
Look, that's
come up
true,
with a
and I can't
counter
come up with
argument.
one. So,
All right.
oh,
Well, let me do it because it's past the hour here. So let's just, and I put up there briefly the so it's a letter from the, and it's both of them, a letter from the personal physician, White House. Actually, it's the White House presidential physician who says that they both have COVID. So at around 1 a.m. Eastern, I think it was 12:54 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Trump released on Twitter, of course, the news that he and his wife both have tested positive for COVID-19. It appears ostensibly as if he contracted it from Hope Hicks. It was after a positive test on her that they decided to run an extra test on Trump, who had been working closely with her, both of them without masks. Um, right now, so he is in one of the highest risk groups, and he seems to be doing just fine right now. But nonetheless, he and his wife are reporting that they will quarantine for at least 14 days. And this is going to completely upend his election schedule. It's going to certainly imperil the debate. Whether or not the debate can even be done is your guess is as good as mine. But and that's where we stand, and that's what we've been talking about. I think Nate here brought up a really good point. I mean, I think emotionally you get more like, oh my God, he's got COVID, and especially, but I think you're right. The long term, the and we also just covered generations theory, which I don't know if you know what generations theory is, but we had on
Mm-mm.
uh, John Shook to discuss generations theory. Basically says that there's actually only four generations, and they just keep cycling through, and one after another, after another, after another. The millennials are just a copy of a generation, four generations before that, four generations before that,
Mm.
and almost every major event from the Civil War to the World War, and even going back through our history as when in England, going back 200, 300, 400, however many years, you find that there are certain generations that have a greater tendency to just upend everything. And we are now at that generation. That's the generation that's in power. Trump is of that generation. And so, uh, uh, excuse me.
Yeah, I'd have to look at that because don't forget life expectancies change dramatically, right? So let's say when life expectancy was 30 years, then those generations are changing even faster than now with 75 years. So yeah.
But keep in mind the maximum it's life expectancy versus what sort of I mean, life expectancy of earlier generations was a lot lower. But if you made it, say, into your 30s, many people there would still make it into their 60s and 70s.
Oh,
They
okay.
did die of tooth decay and other issues that are now commonly. But the sort of the maximum life has extended. You know, people used to not live often into their hundreds. Nowadays, it's a much more achievable goal. But one of the things is when we lowered, so the infant mortality rate used to be 30%. 200 years ago, infant mortality rate
Yep.
was 30%, and that counts into the overall, the average life expectancy, because if you're born and then die 2 weeks later, that counts into life expectancy. When we dropped it to 0.03%, that had a huge impact on life expectancy. That's sort of the modern mortality rate for infants. But all right, so yeah, so generations theory sort of suggests, now I forget why, because I brought up John Shook, and we were going to be discussing World War III and why he thinks that we've already started. I mean, we are certainly in a period of upheaval. A lot of the older rules are just getting thrown out. Trump sort of has changed everything, and there's been a suggestion that we may even already sort of be entering the phases of a civil war because of just how upset people are getting, and the riots and the violence, and how you're getting counter protest. Whole nother thing, and I honestly forget where I was going with that. Um, oh, you had said something about oh Jesus, I don't even remember. Why did I bring up generations
Now,
there?
I feel like we gotta rewind the tape, but I think at the end of the day, because I have to go in 5 minutes because I got to go now teach what is it,
I,
pre-K
I
math
got
to
to
my
start doing
daughter.
that
But
too. Yep.
I will say, but before we close out, two things. Number one, politically, this is a bomb, right? This is the October surprise. We always say this is going to be an October surprise. This is the October surprise. Other than something crazier than this happening. Trump has been sidelined effectively for 2 weeks. 2 weeks before, and then when he comes out, he's got 2 weeks before the election. That's a really short time to make your case to the American people. And Trump has and a lot of the things that Trump had railed against, mask, Joe Biden only doing, video conferences and things of that nature. Now he's going to have to do that if he's going to start campaigning for 2 weeks. And I think that gives the Democrats a lot of talking points. Now, just the facts and reality of it, 95% of the people who get this thing are going to be okay. Trump is more than likely going to be okay. He's not going to be hurt. Boris Yeltsin was the he wasn't the normal. That was the exception, not the rule.
Yep.
So I think the media is going to blow it out to say Trump is all this. What I do think the problem is that he's in a very high risk group. He's got a lot of these markers that don't look good. Like if you have a patient who has COVID, who's obese, 74, heart problems, positive high cholesterol, this is not the person you want to get COVID. You're telling that person to try to avoid it at all costs because it could be life or death. But at the end of the day, we hope this man the best. But this now puts COVID in the position where we're talking about COVID. We're talking about the 25th Amendment. That's not where you want to be talking if you're Trump. You want to be talking about the economy's doing better. Look, we were losing 10 million jobs in a week. Now I got that down to like 700,000 jobs. We added the most jobs to the economy 2 weeks ago. That's where Trump wants to talk. And my opponent is incompetent. And we're doing the best we can with the virus that no one's seen in 5 generations. But you can't make that argument now, because now COVID is right there in everybody's face right before the election. This is just where we're at right now.
And again, at 4% of the population, the U.S. has 4% of the world's population and 20% of the COVID deaths. So it's very easy to argue that this has been completely botched, and it really is the last thing he wants to talk about. Now it's going to dominate news cycles for how long? $5 super chat from Michael Westby. Is this a 200 IQ play since the debate rules were going to be more stringent? So the debate rules, they just added to that they were going to also say that the moderator would have the ability to shut off the mics, which I think would have been, oh, that was just added for the next debate. That would have been, no, I don't think so, because I think it cost him so much more. If he went and did a debate and the moderator killed his mic 20 or 30 times, he'd cry foul, he'd say, see how unfair they are, he would use it to generate, he doesn't want it, but if he can deal with it. That's a narrative he can spin. That's something he can, I think Nate's got an excellent point. I think he's right. I don't know how you spin this. I don't know how you spin this. So he'd be trading a minor inconvenience and something he could spin into a positive for something that's a complete disaster for the campaign. That wouldn't be, that might be a 20 IQ play move, but I don't think I'm not going to go for 200. So,
this guy says Boris Johnson. I keep saying Boris Yeltsin. He's the former president of Russia when they collapsed. I keep saying Boris Yeltsin. It's Boris Johnson.
I make the same, Boris. There's too many. Yep. All right. Well, if you've gotten to this far in the show, I'm going to just what is it? Good writers borrow from other writers, great writers steal from them outright. It's the same thing with YouTube content providers. So I am going to steal a line from a certain content provider and say that if you got to this point in the show and you've enjoyed it, well, that means you've enjoyed it if you stuck all the way through with us. So please like and subscribe. That really helps out the channel, and we hope you will continue to watch. We're gonna cover this. We're gonna do an update on this, and then we're gonna do another update on. There's gonna be a lot to cover over the next couple of days, and then let's see.
Let's just be honest. It costs you nothing to subscribe to the channel, right? You just hit the button, and it helps us pay the bills, and that's essentially what it comes down to. And if you like this content, well, just hit that little red button right there, boop, and we're good to go. And we thank you for coming out with us this morning, right?
Absolutely.
This is great.
It's been great. Thank you, Nate, for coming, especially on such short notice. This was a biggie. And where can people find you? Now, your link is already in the description, but where can people find you?
Nate the Lawyer. That's it. Just type in Nate the Lawyer. It's there. My channel, it's gotten some really great traction recently because of the type of videos I do. I do a lot of videos about law and police shootings and these type of things. So I'm someone who likes to break things down academically for law. And you'll see me on Viva Fari's channel, where we debate a lot of the hot topics of the day. We were debating this last night, but we didn't know that this bomb was going to come out. So, I think at the end of the day, us as creators, we want to get our message out, and this is what we do to do it. We all have different opinions. Like, some things I disagree with Nick about, some things we do agree about, and this is the best way to do it. And we hope you join us on this journey, because this is a journey for all of us. We want to have a relationship, a conversation, and we thank you for joining the conversation this morning. And hopefully you'll come back and hit that button.
Yep. So Nate's channel is in the side chat, and he's former police officer, lawyer, former educator, or still you still teach, right? Or do you have one?
No. I taught a law school for 2 years. So I was a law school lecturer, former prosecutor, former law enforcement officer. Yeah, I got a lot of formers in my name. My wife said you got to stop saying former something. You got to get something that you're actually doing. So I'm a licensed attorney now, So that's what I'm doing. I'm a licensed attorney now, but yeah, I got a lot of formers in my in my repertoire.
But that's the intersection of a lot of interesting police officer, prosecutor, lawyer. That's an interesting intersection now, and you've turned my position around on a number of times. So I've enjoyed your content very much. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you all for coming out, and keep up with us if you like and subscribe. You'll see when we have new
Oops.
stuff, and you can find us on Twitter. And we will catch you all later.